Yo, what's up? It's Jimmy on from Glitchy Thumbs. Today we have character 2.1, Nosy Tails. That's the name I came up with for this character. If you like it, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Or if you have a better name for it, do that too. It's a weird character, I know. It's the first, actually, Frankenstein type character that I have. If you haven't watched the creation of this character in Blender, be sure to do that. I have the link below. Let's see what I came up with for this character in Buildbox. I really don't remember how I came up with it. Let's just see what the process was. Let's go. All right. I open up Buildbox, create new game, 3D game, and we see the standard blank template that they have with the grass and the cube in the middle. Very similar to Blender, actually. At least it reminds me of it, just without the grass. So I drop in the FBX of character 2.1 into Buildbox, click import, move the cube down and move the view so that we can actually see the character. Normally during this process, I eyeball to see if the outline is correct. If you can see the area around the character, there's some sort of like clear part to the mesh, that means the outline is correct. At least that's how I visualize it, and I know that's how outline works. I click the character and click edit in the scene. Now we can actually fill in the outline by changing the color from white to black. This time we have no shading issues, similar to one of the previous characters that I had, the Nosestache Guy. I forget which one he's exactly. Probably like 3.1 or 3.2, not 3. I don't know why I said that. I think it was like 1.3. Yeah. Definitely 1.3. I uncheck receive shadow, and the character is normally gray, but for some reason I was changing the color, which is a very different thing that I do, but I still stick with the gray color, and then click assign. And then I click play. The cube covers Nosy Tails because it's actually dynamic. So when it's in the ground, it tries to pop up, which is why it happens. So we have to change the physics of character 2.1 from none to dynamic. And that brings our character above the cube. This actually looks pretty cool, how it animated into the scene like that from within the floor. So quite possibly that's something I would want in a future game because it's some sort of like magic. You can see we're not exactly directly above the cube. That definitely has to do with the collision shape, and we definitely need to adjust that. Before I do that, now I add the if collide, because previously when we changed the collision shape for the start, we're going to need to do the same for the if collide, so might as well do it at the same time. That's why I'm doing this at the beginning now, where I add a if collide so that we are changing the collision shape at the same time for the start and the if collide, and that cuts down our time for the collision shapes so we can spend more time building the mechanic for this character and any other issues that we come across. I use the scale tool to scale this down. You can just eyeball this. I normally just use the cube as a collision shape for most of my characters. Sometimes it doesn't work correctly because of the shape, but we try our best to make the hitboxes as close as possible to the character. Now when we hit play, character 2.1 is sitting directly on the cube, which is good. I really like how this cube animates in. It's not really animating, it's just that the cube gets stuck. It's just finding a way to get on top of the grass because it's colliding with each other, but it looks cool. This character is smaller than this cube. I scale it up because it looks much better as a bigger character. This animation looks pretty cool that we created for the idle animation. I'm trying to find an angle for this character. Earlier I changed the color for this character, but I didn't really like it. Now I take the texture into Photoshop. We're going to use this magic wand to select the gray area and also the eyes in the texture. Paste it as a new layer. Add another layer for the background. I decided to go with this purple. The area that's going to be the body of the character is the gray area, so I fill it in with purple. But now the nose is still gray, which is incorrect. So I just copied that area to keep the nose black and have a full purple color for our character, and keeping the eyes white, of course. And then save this to our computer. If you want to keep the Photoshop file, you save it as PSD. If you want to export the PNG, you would go to export, quick export as PNG. I didn't want to replace this file because in case we want to revert back to the previous texture, we could do that. I just gave it a new name, new texture, so that we have two files that we can use for two different textures. To use the new texture, you just drag it into texture for the body, and that replaces the gray color that we had. I'm not sure why I chose purple, but purple looks pretty cool for character 2.1, Nosy Tails. Purple Nosy Tails. It's a really cool name. I like it. It should be a final character if I do decide to polish this a little bit more. He's a very early stage character. So yeah, that's how you would do it for the texture. The eyes is purple and it shouldn't be like that, but that's okay. Now you guys know how to create a new texture with a new color for your character. That's how you would do it the fastest and most simplest way without having to go through the entire texture paint and Blender again. Now for character 2.1 is to find some sort of view that works for this character. I don't really know how I usually come up with this process. I just eyeball it because we really want to see the front of the character because of the way I drew him and the way I created him. We can only see most of his body from the front. A side view would look really weird. We can't really look at it from the back either. It doesn't really show much in the back. So I duplicated the start scene, changed it to 1, deleted the character. That way we have another cube for the next platform because I'm trying to come up with some sort of mechanic for this. I moved the cube closer to us but on the far left. That way we can see where the next cube is. I move it back, but this time to the far left. And then I move it closer to us so that we can get the cube in more of a zigzag type mechanic. From the looks of this, it looks like I was trying to create a jumping mechanic where he would jump from right to left on top of the cube. At least that's what it looks like. Since we don't need the ground, I changed it to no ground and everything falls down as usual because everything's set to dynamic. So I set the cubes to kinematic. We do need some sort of floor. So I changed the ground back to no texture, but more of a gray color. Now it looks like we're on floor panels instead of on cubes. Making those simple changes already changed the perspective and the concept of character 2.1. You can already imagine what I was trying to do for this type of game mechanic, jumping on different panels, but more of a zigzag type setup. But we don't have all the scenes just yet. I click into character 2.1 and add a 4-way swipe. Interesting, because I thought it was going to be a jumping mechanic. Didn't realize it was going to be a swipe mechanic. Again, I didn't really watch these videos. These are old videos and I'm just going through it and narrating. If I get it wrong, I get it wrong. But it's pretty cool to see the thought process of what I actually came up with, what I think I came up with. That's why sometimes it seems like I might not know what I'm talking about because I don't. I recorded these months ago and now I'm just narrating. Back to the video, I add a 4-way swipe and then I add a state machine. The state machine is to keep each direction in its specific state. So if it's moving up, I want it to always be moving up in that state. If it's moving down, I want it to always move down in that state so that it doesn't affect any of the other movement states. At least that's how I think it works because I created a mechanic similar to roller splat and this was how I set it up. I think I have that video somewhere on my YouTube, if I remember correctly. So that's already a mechanic that I already thought of, and I'm just using it on this character. I guess that's where it came from. So I'm connecting up to up, down to down, left to left, right to right. For the up, I have a move node. I duplicated 4 of them because we're gonna have move up, move down, move left, move right. For move up, I have it set to 1.5 on the y-axis and 0 for x and z. Moving down, I have negative 1.5 in the y-axis and 0 for x and z. Moving left, I have 1.5 in the x-axis and 0 for y and z. For move right, I have 1.5 in the x-axis and 0 for x and z. Moving left should actually be negative, so that's why I added that. And then I saved the Buildbox file. I just select one of the old names, create a new folder called character 2.1 and then just change this to 2_1. That keeps everything organized for me. And then click play, swipe to the left side. I think I'm swiping left, but yeah, I'm either swiping up or I'm swiping left, but I'm definitely swiping left. Looks like, and then it hits the cube and stops. For move up, there's a 1.5 in the z-axis, which is incorrect. It should have been 0. I probably didn't press enter, but we're focusing on the move left at the moment, so the others don't really make a difference. I think the movement was too slow, so I changed the x-axis to 3. Now it's moving in the wrong direction, so now I changed it to -3. That's still a little bit too slow, so I changed it to -4. This movement looks perfect. I didn't like how the character just stopped stops in front of the cube. What I did was change the cube from kinematic to none to see how that looks. This is what I wanted for character 2.1 to glide to next platform, but now we need something to stop it from moving. Otherwise it'll just keep moving off screen. And the movement was definitely a little bit too fast, so I changed it back to -3. On the first scene, we're gonna need something that blocks the character from moving again. So I duplicated the cube, named it as block, changed the color from white to yellow. And this is going to stop character 2.1 from gliding past the screen. You can't see it because I removed the mesh, so you can only see the outline. So when we swipe left, character moves to the left, and it's still gliding past because this block doesn't have physics yet. We originally switched it to none, so now we have to change it back to kinematic. And now when we swipe left, character 2.1 glides to the next platform. Right when he's above it, he stops because of that block. And that's correct. Now for the if collide, the affected asset is going to be the block. I duplicated the subscene this time, so when the character collides with the block, I want the character to rotate 90 degrees. That way it changes direction so that we can move to the next platform. Right now it won't look correct if he's always facing left. Duplicating the subscene doesn't really work because if you have two of them, they overlap each other like this. So that wasn't the solution. I decided to fix something else in the mechanic, to duplicate one of the move nodes and have a move pause, because when we move left, he's still moving left because it's in a left state, so that movement never stops. I was thinking at this time to pause the movement whenever it collided with the yellow block. I set this to 0 for X, Y, and Z. I tested again by swiping right just to make sure that the character still moves even though it was paused, and it worked. So that seemed to be correct. Now we needed to move up. I changed the z-axis to 0 because that was incorrect earlier. When I swipe up, the character actually floats in the air and doesn't move forward because we set it to 1.5 in the y-axis. That's why he's floating in the air. That was actually incorrect. What we had previously might have been correct, with the z-axis being 1.5. Now the y-axis I put to 0 and the z-axis to 1.5. 1.5 actually moves the character towards us, which is incorrect. Now we have to put -1.5 because that moves character 2.1 away from us, which is correct. And I move this to your characters because I plan to have the camera follow the character. Right now, if we swipe up, there's no movement following the character. That's why he's just moving further and further away from the camera and nothing is following. I click the camera, set it to character, so that way every time we move, camera follows the character. This time I changed it to game path. You can see when we do that, the camera follows the game path. So that's a different way to use the camera follow. I normally don't use game path, but that actually is something I should experiment a little bit more. Right now I'm in debug mode because I'm trying to see why the character actually stops when we move up. It's because our collision shape actually hits the yellow block, and that stops us from going past the platform. It works correctly when we move to the left side, but incorrectly when we move up. The block should actually be in front of the platform now. So I duplicate scene 1 to create our second scene and actually move the cube further to the left to see. I forget what I was testing here actually. I was definitely messing around with the movement and everything is moving a bit too slow, so I increased it to 5 this time. So far for this mechanic, if you swipe at any time, the movement will just go all over the place, which isn't good for the long run because then I would have to figure out how to fix that. Even if I get the mechanic correct with the blocks and everything, we'll still have that issue with the mechanic where the player will just swipe at any time and the movement will just go off course anyways. I'm selecting all the nodes that we created for this swipe movement. I paste it into the cube, which is interesting, and reconnect that. I'm not sure why I did that. I delete scene 1 and scene 2. It looks like I'm changing the mechanic at this point. Most likely I realized that the mechanic won't work anyway, so might as well change the gameplay to something else. And I delete this swipe mechanic within the cube now. Instead, I just drag the cube into character 2.1 so that it's a child, but it inherits pretty much all the movements that character 2.1 body does, and then I click play. So this is the new game mechanic where Nosy Tails is sitting on top of the platform and we're swiping in 4 directions, left, right, up, and down, and that moves the character. Now that we have this different game mechanic, I need to move the view in a way where it suits the movement of this swipe mechanic. We definitely need to see the character in front to see its face, but also the animation, but it also has to make sense with moving up, down, left, and right. The best position for this would be a front view. I click play so I can actually adjust the view much better and see where I want the character to be. We want it to be directly in the middle, a little bit further, so we can see incoming objects. I'm typing whole numbers here to keep everything nice and tidy. This mechanic already looks very different from what we started with. This is what normally happens as I progress building a prototype. If something doesn't work, I just try something different. Like I said, I don't have anything in mind for any of these characters. I just go with the flow. Whatever I come up with is whatever I come up with. I'm trying to be creative when I do this, trying to think of something different than I did the last time for the previous character. That way I'm always improving and trying to learn Buildbox again, since I'm a little bit rusty, but also try to come up with something new every time and just keep flexing that creativity muscle. The more times you practice being creative, the better that creativity muscle gets. At least that's how I think of it. And now for the character, I'm adding a touch node. Every time the player presses the screen, it will move left. Every time the player lets go of the screen, it will move right. Now we're actually changing the game mechanic again for something much more simple. And then I test it. Press play, character 2.1 moves left. When I tap and let go, it moves right now. But when I tap, it goes left, but goes right again when I let go. I think the mechanic didn't work with the way this was set up. At this point, I knew there's a node for this already. I was looking for it within the nodes that were available. I just forgot which one it was or whatever it was named. It's the switch node. I actually try the move in direction node. This is a node I've never used before, but that one doesn't look correct. That's actually wrong. I guess I decided to test this touch method again. It kind of works and it kind of doesn't. I'm still trying to look for that node. I go to one of the templates and I open up Lockstar to see how this mechanic was created. And in this one is a touch node with a signal invert, so I actually tried that instead, but I forgot how the connection worked, so I went back to the Lockstar template again. The release is connected to the signal invert, and then out is back into the touch. There's also a signal filter and an invert above that as well. So this is a little bit confusing. I don't think this was correct. I took a screenshot of the node system just so I have some sort of reference. That's what I normally do, just take screenshots of things. I could have also exported that BB asset and used that as a tab, but I didn't think of it at the time. This signal invert way with the release doesn't seem to work how I imagine it to be. Now I'm going back into the Lockstar template and just studying it one more time. I click into the pivot hero. Aha, there's the node that I've been looking for, which is the switch node. I completely forgot the name for it, but that's how I figured it out. That's the node that I was looking for the entire time. It's called switch. I just forgot about it. Now this way will definitely work. Whenever the player touches the screen, it will switch between left and right. Now the game mechanic is simple, where the character will be dodging objects by tapping the screen, going left and right. And every tap will switch between left or right to avoid the incoming obstacles. The character was rotating a little bit weird, so we know now to change the rotation factor from 1 to 0. That way it doesn't rotate and just stays in place. Now we have this new mechanic. We'll call it the switch mechanic. We'll need some enemies. Now I changed the block to more of a red color and add back in a cone mesh. This will be the incoming enemies. I put it on the far left for scene 1, duplicate that. For scene 2, I put it on the far right. For scene 3, we'll have the red cone in the middle and change the collision group to enemy and the if collide to enemy in our character. Add a defeat node and a debris explosion, we'll need another object. I add a sphere, call this debris, change the color with the eyedrop to our purple color. This is going to be our death animation where our character explodes into a bunch of small spheres. Back into the character in the debris explosion, I add the sphere under asset, add a event node so that it takes us to the game over screen. We'll need a UI for the gameplay that has a event observer, because the event observer takes us to the game over screen. That's how it creates the game over connection point. I add another UI screen and rename it to game over, add a navigation button so that we can restart the level when we die. That's the game mechanic. Let's hit play. We see the character moves left and right. Every time we tap the screen, the character moves left. When I tap, it switches to the right. When I tap again, it switches to the left. We see the red cones, but they're not coming towards us. So we need to add a move node so that the character moves forward by 5. That's why we have -5. But now we can't switch the directions if the character is moving forward. So I try a different node, the path move instead, or the move in direction, which doesn't seem correct either. But I try the path move this time. That doesn't work with our switch mechanic. If the character is moving, then you can't really do anything else. So I actually tried the move node again, but this time in the X and Y, I removed the zeros to none. That probably was the reason why it wasn't working to begin with, because we had it set to 0 on the X and we're moving left and right on the X. So that's why we couldn't move with the switch. Now we test it and this looks correct. We have spikes coming towards us and we're trying to dodge it, but we're dying for some reason because of the hit boxes on the block. So I checked the collision shape and it was originally a cube. So that's why the collision shape was incorrect. So I'm fixing this, changing the collision shape to mesh and selecting the cone, and that's correct. But I don't see the debris explosion, so I connect the event node after the debris explosion. So whenever we hit the cone, you will be able to see the small spheres as our death animation. But that's also incorrect so far, because now you see the cube with a bunch of spheres. So I uncheck the event node to see if the debris even shows at all. It looks like our platform is rising above the ground along with the debris explosion, which is incorrect. So I add a send node to kill the block when the character gets defeated, and then add a receive node inside of the cube to remove the block. Click play, and that worked. You can see our character shatters into a bunch of small spheres. That's what the debris explosion does, but it's supposed to be purple. It's white right now, which is incorrect. So I uncheck inherit color. This is interesting. When I click play, when the cube hits the cone, part of it rises up. Interesting, because we can actually use this at some point in a future game maybe, or this can actually be a new game mechanic where the platform rises above the ground depending on what objects it collides into. So I don't know, but good thing I have this on video. Maybe that becomes a new game mechanic in the future because it looks pretty cool. But definitely unchecking inherit color worked because now the spheres are purple. That's correct. It was most likely inheriting the white color because our character is all white. We just have a texture on top of it that is purple. That's why I had to uncheck inherit color. For the cube, what did I do to fix this? We don't want it to come out the ground like that, even though it looks pretty cool. I decided to scale it down, but that still collides with the enemy. So I reverted back to the original size. I added a if collide for the cube. If collided with the enemy, send a signal for defeat back into the character. Add a receive node to defeat connected to the defeat node. That seems to fix the issue and complete our game mechanic. Now we just need to connect our event node after the debris explosion. But before we do that, the debris actually pause and we don't want that. So we need to add a delay node so that there's a delay between the debris explosion and taking us to the game over screen. We actually want to see the defeated animation before taking us to the game over screen. And that's correct. We just need to add a little bit more of a delay. So I changed it to 1 for the debris. I changed the linear velocity from 5 to 0 in the X. And then it doesn't really do anything because when we're moving left, the debris move that direction. So I just changed it back and unchecked preserve momentum to see what happens. And that actually looks much better because the debris kind of just explode in place. We don't want it to move left or right with the momentum. So that's the game mechanic for character 2.1, Nosy Tails. To export this, I go to File, Project Settings, use the same bundle ID I've always been using, Export, iOS, save it to my folder, go to characters 2.1, new, click characters 2.1 new, iOS, click the xCode project in the middle with the white icon. xCode opens in info under bundle display name, add character 2.1 under assigning and capabilities, select my team. And then on the bundle ID, I add some sort of value for this character is 2.1. Again, this keeps the apps separate on my device, so I can click between different characters when I need to, and then click play. Now the mechanic is sent to my phone for me to play test, and I can have a screen recording of it. This is the recording from my iPhone. We have character 2.1, Nosy Tails. The mechanic is a switch mechanic, so when you tap the screen, character will move left and right, and your goal is to dodge the incoming red spikes. If you don't dodge them, you get defeated, and you get this cool debris explosion. That's the game mechanic for character 2.1. Super simple. That concludes the video for character 2.1, Nosy Tails. Interesting how I came about this mechanic. It's going to be a very simple prototype for most of these characters, unless I think of something complex. But that was my thought process on how I came up with this game mechanic. It took some time. We actually went through some sort of zigzag type style game mechanic to get to this. The thought process is pretty cool. I forgot how I came about the final game mechanic. I thought I just came up with the switch mechanic right from the start, but I guess I didn't. So it's good to actually rewatch these videos, and possibly that bug that we saw where the platform was moving in the air every time it collided with an enemy will become a feature maybe, or a new game mechanic for a future character. Who knows? I'm glad I saw it in the video, so now it's actually ingrained in my mind that that's possible, and possibly I might use that for a future character. And so far so good that I'm making progress in this whole character development journey of mine of building different characters with different game mechanics. I'm having fun doing it, and I'm glad that I'm recording all of it because it's pretty cool to rewatch it. I hope you check out the next character, character 2.2, for the Blender process, but also the Buildbox process. I have some of the Procreate videos on how I actually drew these characters. That's also somewhere on my YouTube Shorts, or on my TikTok. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think about these characters. If you have a better name for them, if you think this process is cool, if you hate it, whatever, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. Appreciate your help for liking this video. You know what I'm saying? See you next video. It's time to eat because I'm hungry. Peace out.